Today we're starting with the Squinter. I'm going to go over the description in the book, a little bit about how to drill it on the Pell, because this is a tougher mechanic, I think, for a lot of people. And we'll just kind of look at the two examples we're given in this first play, and then we'll move on. So let me read it to you. So the Zettel is Squinter breaks in whatever buffalo strikes or stabs. Whoever threatens change, Squinter robs him of it. Here is Ringeck's gloss. The Squinter is a hew which counters the buffalo, they who take mastery with violence in hewing and stabbing, and perform the hew like this. When he hews in from above his right side, hew also from your right side with the short edge with outstretched arms against his hew in the weakness of his sword, and strike him onto his right shoulder as is pictured hereafter. If he disengages, shoot in with the point along to the chest, and hew like this also when he stands against you in the guard of the plow, or when he wants to stab you below. So the mechanic is, like I said, one of the tougher things. A joke that I make at the club quite a bit is that the mechanics are all Hadoukens from Street Fighter. So if you've ever played the video game and we're doing the throwing the fireball, because what that forces us to do is pivot and drive and do everything from the body. So I think if this is a new mechanic for you, the easiest way to practice is to start with your thumb grip in your lazy shoulder Vomtog. Eventually we're going to want to get it used to from kind of a standard grip and doing the transition into the thumb grip. But like I said, if this is new for you, maybe just start with the thumb grip with the flat on the shoulder, the lazy Vomtog. And what we're going to do is we're going to pivot and we're going to drive out across. So this is going to be a descending false edge cut. And we want to make sure that we're going from our right side across to our left. Because what we're going to be doing against that overcut is we're actually going to be attempting to strike our opponent on the right shoulder. So when I do this on the Pell, what I will do is I will get into my stance, and what I'm looking to do is pivot and drive my sword and have it run down the right side of the Pell. So I actually would like to hear it run down a little bit. If you smack the middle, this can still work, but with their force, you're likely to get deviated off. So we want, like I said, to actually cross that line. The nice thing about having the points on the target is if we're practicing against a high cut, what I find is that if I aim towards my high line, this is going to give me a good angle to defeat the opponent's overcut. I find that when I'm making contact with an opponent's sword, my hands being a little lower than my blade gives me a stronger position. Sometimes you see people try to make contact with the high hands, and I find that gets deflected a little bit easier. So if you're aiming at the high line on your target, just make sure you do keep your hands a little lower. And so this is the counter. The opponent's striking in high. We're going to pivot and drive. We're going to deflect their cut and cut them. We're going to kind of rip off their right ear down into their shoulder. So the first application is against the opponent throwing a heavy overcut. The second application that is given to us is that this defeats the plow, which is that low point forward guard. I also find this very useful against like a long point. So any kind of point threatening lower guard, the Squinter is a good option. And for this one on the Pell, initially when I'm practicing the motion, I'm still going to be trying to cross the line. And now I'm just aiming for that middle line. So I'm going to have a slightly lower targeting, but I still want my hands to be a little bit lower than my blade on that initial contact. And again, if you're hitting the middle, that's not so good. Make sure, you do want it pretty tight. So I actually try to make sure that I'm sliding down my Pell and I can hear it. Once you feel like you're crossing that line and you're getting that pretty well, take a step back, and what we're going to practice is the deflection and then a step and thrust. Easy enough. Deflection, step and thrust. Deflection, step and thrust. When we're doing this as a pair drill at the club, what I tell people is if, whether they're in a plow or an extended guard, we want to hit onto their blade and then slide down into the shield, and we're kind of creating a wedge and then driving that wedge bigger. So I tell people to think about almost like they're going to cut down and cut off the shield of the opponent's fetter if they have one, or cut into the cross piece. What a lot of people do is they'll go to contact and then stop, and they're not going to get the opponent's point off the line, and then if they try to step in, they're not going to have good control. So cut all the way down and then step. So there's not a lot to explain really. This is one of those movements that I think once you understand the basics, you just have to drill it until you get a feel for it. So one more time. Again, easiest way to start is with the thumb grip and the lazy shoulder Vomtog. The high cut, you're going to be cutting across the line. descending false edge cut, ripping off their right ear into their shoulder while we're deflecting their cut. And if you're doing this on the pel, look at the high line if you have one. And we're going from our right to their right. So we're crossing to the opposite line of the pel. We want this to be pretty tight. And then against a point forward, low guard, whether that's plow or long point. Now we're going to be coming down a little bit lower, thinking about making contact and then continuing the cut down until we run into the shield or the quilly in the opponent's weapon to clear the point, keep a good solid structure, and then step forward to thrust. A lot of people, they try to do it all in one motion and they usually don't get very good control. So think about pivot, cut, step so that you make sure you have established good center line control before you do it. So again, on the pel, we can practice attacking that middle line. And then once we have that crossing kind of comfortable, we can step out a little bit and just practice throwing the cut and then stepping into the thrust. I find this usually goes into the throat, which works out pretty well. So play with those two motions, really with the one motion and the two applications. If you have any questions, send me some messages and we'll talk about some of the other plays next week.